Hello YouTube, it's me again with another video. Today's video is going to be a bit different. I was going to put out a build guide, but I ended up deciding not to because I wasn't happy with it. So, while I couldn't get the video I wanted to get out, it did spark the idea to put out another video, which I had been thinking about doing, which is my review of Elden Ring. And generally just what I feel about it, how I feel about the DLC. Because I know there's a lot of controversy going around where it has mixed reviews on Steam, there's a lot of people complaining it's too difficult, and I have to say, I'm fairly empathetic on that. But maybe not necessarily for the same reasons. So, first of all, I want to go ahead and say I do enjoy the game. The DLC is enjoyable, but it's not as good as the base game in my opinion. I would give the base game a 4 out of 5 or an 8 out of 10, maybe a 9 out of 10. I give the DLC like a 3 out of 5, more like a 6, maybe 7 out of 10, where it's not under like the 5 or under point to where it's kind of like, this isn't very good. It's good because it gives you the tools to kind of compensate. I'll get into that in just a minute here, but I wanted to basically give my view or my score of kind of how I review this game. So yeah, I would say a 4 out of 5 and a 3 out of 5 for the DLC. So the base game, it's been out a while now. I don't know if I necessarily need to review the base game. Everyone seems to be collectively in love with it. It was great. Dark Souls, but open world. A rich, explorable environment. It wasn't overly difficult. And if you got stuck, you had an entire world pretty much to just go and like roam around until you can find something that will allow you to get unstuck, or you can, there's a load of other quests you could get stuck into. So if you couldn't get a boss, I remember the very first boss that you're meant to beat to get to the round table, they even put a sneaky little shortcut in around the corner so you could actually get to the round table without having to kill the first boss if he was giving you that much trouble. And it was generally just a very nice game. It gave those kind of considerations. Obviously there are a few areas where it's deliberately obnoxious, deliberately difficult, but for the majority of the game, those were very minimal, optional things, right? The optional path for Elden Ring base game got a little bit difficult, but it wasn't, or I shouldn't say difficult, it got a little bit obnoxious. There's stuff in there that's just kind of irritating, like the Halig tree and Melania. It's not necessarily difficult, it's a lot of silly stuff that will get you killed for literally no reason. Like, it'll make you make mistakes by being set up deliberately to make you make a mistake. So, but that's not really prevalent for the majority of Elden Ring base games, so it's generally a nice exploring kind of experience. I remember the first time I played it, I did a two-handed weapon, great weapon build, strength build. I didn't really know very much about the game. As I said, I'm quite casual about these games. And I just kind of slowly trudged my way through it, and I was able to just kind of casually explore without too much pressure, right? I'd get to a boss, it would beat me back for like half an hour to an hour, and then eventually I'd beat it, feel amazing, move on. The mobs generally didn't mess me around. They weren't deliberately obnoxious. You could adventure your way through. Like, sure, eventually they would kill you occasionally, but it didn't feel like they were necessarily deliberately placed to just destroy you or make it as miserable an experience as possible. So you would, and it didn't really, at least to me at the time, it didn't really matter what build you were running. You could explore at your own pace without being or feeling punished for it, right? I did get stuck originally on the base game. I did get stuck, and I remember quite clearly I was roaming around looking for something to do, because obviously I couldn't get past this boss, and I was like, man, how am I gonna do this? This is annoying. And this is a time when, like, we didn't know anything about the game really. It was still very early. And I remember I managed to beat one of the golden horse guys. The name escapes me at the moment, and I got his shield. Complete game changer. Complete game changer for me. I got a shield and a great weapon, and I started doing the attack counters. And that completely opened the game up into me entirely. It opened the bosses up. It was really cool. And then if I wanted to do some special effects, I'd switch to the two-handed version and use its Ashes of War. And then it would get slightly more and more difficult again. And then, you know, I got stuck doing the twin gargoyles as to get into one of the underground areas. I can't remember the name. And you know, the same thing happened again. I went around trying to go, you know, how am I going to do this? I ended up doing the Rani quest line. Ended up in the different underground area still. And I got the Mimic. And then I go back in and I've got the Mimic. I've got my shield. I've got my great weapon. And I managed to overcome the problem then again. And it just felt like a smooth progression all the way through the game. So that's why it kind of has this 4 out of 5 rating for me, because while the only thing that really took away from it were the dragons. The dragons were the worst part about the base game. By a long shot, they were horrible to fight. The camera absolutely hated it. You would spend more time fighting the camera than you would fighting the dragon. It would be off screen doing stuff, and your camera literally would not be able to look up and see what it was doing. And they weren't hard, they were just tedious. Like, there's a big difference between difficult and tedium, I find. And when you're fighting the camera and you're dying, it's not because it's difficult, it's because it's tedious. So that's my only negative of the Elden Ring base game. And I generally, it was a really nice experience. It's not my favorite FromSoft game. Before I go on and talk about the DC, I will say what my favorite FromSoft game. My favorite FromSoft game, from a gameplay perspective, is actually Sekiro. I found that game to be incredibly entertaining. I remember the final boss, Yashin, I think his name is, or something. I fought him for what must be like 9 hours straight. 9 hours straight, just going in and in and in and in, and I absolutely loved it. It was driving me crazy, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't losing to tedium, I was losing to difficulty. Because the technical fighting of Sekiro, to me, in my opinion, is better than in any other FromSoft game that I've played. Now, to be clear, I haven't played Bloodborne because it was only on a PlayStation. And I haven't played Demon Souls because that was only on a PlayStation 2. And I refuse to buy an entire console for a single game, no matter how much I want it. So I haven't played those two games. So we're talking out of Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, the remastered versions, and Elden Ring. Sekiro comes out on top for me. And mostly because, for the most part, Sekiro was done fighting humanoid and human-sized mobs and bosses. Like, some of them were bigger than you, like the heroes, the characters. Quite often your guy was just like tiny. But they were never so big that the camera was literally throwing a tantrum. You were never, like, your camera wasn't snapping around all over the place, flailing wildly. And I quite enjoyed the combat mechanics, you know, the stamping on the thrust, jumping on the spin, parrying, you know, the cleave and stuff like that. Like, there was a lot of mechanic, and for only having a single weapon, you only had that one katana throughout the entirety of the game, pretty much. That's ignoring the axe and stuff. The axe was like, I didn't necessarily enjoy those, but it wasn't negative to the game's playing experience. But the amount of stuff that you did with that one katana was amazing. And I feel like if Elden Ring or a Dark Souls game had that level of mechanical technicality, it would be vastly superior. It would be amazing. You know, imagine like Godfrey comes in like swinging his axe, and your guy's able to do like an Ash of War or something that basically he catches the axe under his foot, slams it into the ground, and then opens you up for like a swinging attack or whatever, like some kind of stuff like that. Dark Souls, to me, everything is so monstrously big that even if you can parry something, it never occurs psychologically that that is something that you should do, right? This thing's so big that it's practically off the screen, or he's jumping so high. Radahn is a good example. You can parry Radahn. Are you gonna ever think to parry Radahn when he's literally above the camera for 90% of the fight? You can't see because there's big blinding lights everywhere. Like, it's just a little bit too extra, right? Whereas Sekiro kind of kept the fight and the game in the realms of the humanoid sphere. Like, nothing was seemed too big. Obviously, the extra boss, like the Rage Demon, was ridiculous. I absolutely hated it. There were a few gimmicky fights where stuff was really big, but for the most part, at least, it felt like, you know, the biggest enemy was some kind of, like, troll or giant type, big humanoid. It wasn't so big that your camera was freaking out. And I quite enjoyed that. And the bosses were really quite technical too. I remember I've probably never died so much in a FromSoft game than I did when I played Sekiro. But I've never enjoyed meeting that skill difficulty so much in any other game, right? I go in against R'Lana on the DLC and I'm fighting them and I get their health low, and the next thing I know, these big orbs drop on the ground, sending shockwaves, and it takes me several tries to work out what the hell is even going on, because, you know, it doesn't necessarily trigger, and sometimes I'll do it when you're just getting up, or sometimes I'll do it after you've been knocked down and it traps you into this 3-hit true combo that just insta-killed you. And Sekiro didn't have anything like that. And Souls games notoriously kind of have that kind of element to them, like the Dark Souls sets. They've progressively got bigger and bigger and bigger monsters. I remember like Dark Souls 3 just had so many giant swordsman things that, you know, most of your screen was filled with effects, and then Elden Ring just took that up to 11. But then again, still, the base game wasn't that bad. The DLC, however, I'll move on to the DLC now. The reason I give that a 3 out of 5 is because it is that bad. Your first introduction to fights, boss fights, generally, is the dancing lion and the golden hippo. These were my 2 introductions to bosses, and I hated it. I absolutely loathed it. The dancing lion guy, what was he doing 90% of the time? Couldn't tell you. Could I parry any of it? Couldn't tell you. How did I beat it? Pretty sure I died. Or no, I'm pretty sure when I finally did kill it on my own, I was face deep in its belly while it's flailing around on top of me, and I'm just swinging for that last bit of HP to go away. And I can't tell what the hell is going on. I only know that I need to hit it and I need to finish it off, like, now, before it blasts me. Because I can't see what's going on, because I'm, like, you know, backed into a corner pretty much, and this thing's just flailing around in the sky. You don't know what it's doing. And it's the same thing for the hippo. The hippo is arguably even worse, because it will literally knock you up against the wall and then proceed to squish you in against the wall while you're taking tons of damage, and you just can't see anything. You literally can't see anything. Like, the arena is so small, you can't see. You cannot see. So those are the two first boss introductions, which is like, wow, okay, I did not enjoy that. And then you try to go elsewhere, only to realize that you need these Skadootree things. Like, you make your way up to like a different boss, and you haven't collected any of those things, and you just get destroyed because you need them. They're important. They're the balancing mechanic. That's the mechanic that's reset you back to zero, rather than balancing around an estimated end game. They opted to basically knock everyone back by adding an additional means of scaling. And it wasn't gated by boss, it was gated by exploration, which is at the same time slightly gated by bosses. So it was like, okay, now I have to go and explore, not because I want to, but because I have to. Because progression in every direction is now blocked by a boss that I can't beat, either because the camera is so absolutely horrible and I'm looking for like an alternative path, or I need these upgrades because I'm getting my ass beat. And that's when the mob issue starts to get in, because then, you know, when you're walking through and you've got those shadow guys, they're really simple, really basic. You're like, okay, this is kind of chill. I can go and explore with this. This is fine. And then you quickly start running into mobs that are specifically designed to just irritate the hell out of you. The first one that comes to mind is the little gargoyles with the cannon faces. And it hits you and it knocks you like 20 feet backwards and takes pretty much all your health off. Like, really? Did we really need that? In a confined space as well? It just feels extra, and it just feels like it's designed to irritate. And I found that quite a lot on my way through, because before I really found how I was going to go about this, I just kept walking into knights and stuff, and by the time I'd kill one, I've traded like a load of flasks, because as I said, I'm quite casual at this game. I'm not a pro, I can't dodge everything. And I've traded a load of HP, and I've got next to no flask, and then that's not it, right? There's no save after that. I have to then go even further, and then I end up walking into not one, but another two. One with a bow, one with a spear. And it's like, huh. That's brutal. And then I get killed, obviously. And then it suffers from the one thing that all Souls games tend to suffer from a little bit. But this, in the DLC, got really bad. And that's when I decided to make the build that I did. I basically stopped playing, and I was like, right, I need to find something that's going to allow me to survive. And the reason being was because I was no longer playing the game as like an adventure or an exploration. Not like how I played the first game, where I was just kind of walking around, going through caves, exploring. I'd die occasionally, go back, and it would be fine. I found myself basically falling into the trap of tedium, because these mobs were like designed to really irritate you. And obviously you notice it more when you don't have the upgrades, and you don't have a proper build set in place. And it's like, yeah, I found myself running between grace points and bosses, and not actually doing any of the exploration, not taking the time to kill any of the mobs. I was basically running around on torrent, grabbing everything I could, and if I wasn't on torrent, I was sprinting, running, getting everything I could, and then frantically trying to get to a point of grace so that I don't like lose all of my runes. Because when I first came into the DLC, I think I was only level like 109. 109 and no Skadootree things. At which point I was just getting my ass beat absolutely everywhere. To the point where I was like, alright, I need to, I'm not good enough for this. I need to go back to the base game, farm myself some runes, pick up a few items that I may have missed, because I didn't complete the whole thing. I didn't get everything. and then I need to come back with an actual strategy and a build that will allow me to do it, which is when I came back with the poking build. At that point, the DLC had been out a couple of days and I'm kind of short on it, and then I'm able to look and see what the new items are and be like, okay, that looks interesting, that looks interesting. I think I can put this together, and that's when I made the build that I put out initially. So after I did that, well, that build was probably better than better than anticipated, and it allowed me to just kind of like RP walk my way through the entire game. It was an absolutely lovely experience. The only disappointment was it wasn't very showy and it wasn't very cool. You would walk in with your shield up, prodding everything to death. And it allowed me to see everything, but it also pointed out another one of the issues I have with Elden Ring, and that is not all things are equal. And as I started making these builds, I've been realizing this more and more now is, you know, okay, so you're going to make a build, alright, how's the best way to maximize the damage? Get bleed on it, alright, so you're going to have bleed. What's the best way to scale the bleed? Alright, arcane, so you've got arcane, okay, what's the best way to do that? Well, you might as well take a dragon communal seal, because it scales S rank with arcane, so you've got incantations for free with that, so you'll take it because, you know, why not? Which means you're going to put points into faith because you want Golden Vow, potentially Howl of Shabiri, Black Flame Protection or whatever it is. Like, you know, so all of those stuff start falling into place, and it's like, alright, okay, so my main way of killing damage is I'm going to trigger bleeds. So what do I need for bleed? Well, I'm going to have the talisman that gives me bleed. It's like, and then every single build that does bleed, you've got a white mask on, and it's like, oh my god, that's annoying. So when you get into the DLC, I feel like it kind of funnels you towards the meta, whereas the base game allowed you to go in any direction you liked, and pretty much anything could work. But in the DLC, I feel like the room for creativity is incredibly limited, and I just kind of, I wish that bonuses weren't linked to get to costume pieces, and I wish that more items were viable. And I suppose everything is viable if you put enough effort into it and you have the skill to do it, but I'm talking from like a casual perspective. I wish everything felt like it was viable. Like, I wish I felt like I could decide to go with the fist weapons without min-maxing the ever-living poop out of it, and then running around with the white mask again because I'm, you know, I'm a Dane's footwork bleed build again to maximize and make it actually viable. Like, it feels like there's very little alternatives. And that's another issue that I have with the Elden Ring DLC. You just feel cornered into really min-maxing your stuff because of the brutality of the DLC. So, like I said, I don't hate it, but I don't like it as much as I would like other stuff. So that's pretty much all I have to say on it. Thank you for listening to me ramble if you're still here. If you're not, I completely understand. I'm just a casual trying to make it on the YouTubes, playing the Elden Ring at the moment. I'm not a major, like, super in-depth Elden Ring player, so there's probably a lot I'm missing. And yeah, so what I'd have to give my review is a 4 out of 5 base game, 3 out of 5 DLC. Not terrible, but it ain't great. That's basically it. Going forward, I'm going to make some more videos. I'm going to try and make some more builds. If the builds don't work in future, as has been suggested to me, I will make videos of don't fall into the trap doing what I did. This is bad. This feels bad from a casual perspective. Avoid at all costs if it fails. So there should be videos coming out from me about Elden Ring in the near future. Obviously, I need more larval tears. But yeah, that's still going to be it for me. Thank you for listening. I'd be interested to know what your favourite FromSoft game is and why, and your opinion on the DLC and the game as a whole, because I'm quite interested to see. Obviously, it's easy to find the negative reviews. It's easy especially on Steam, people just get mad and they don't really have a reason as to why they're mad. Like, they can't explain it or articulate it very well. So I am genuinely interested in finding out, you know, what people's takes on it is. And obviously, if you've got a build or anything to recommend, I would very much like to give it a try if I can. But that's all for me for now. Thank you for listening to me ramble, and that's just gonna be it. Okay, bye-bye.